You know, it was not online. It didn't happen. Okay, so as I mentioned during our discussion last week with Hanukkah, really this week's class should have come first, but then we would have missed Hanukkah. So we jumped the gun because there are holidays that are mentioned in the Torah, and then there are Torah holidays. As I mentioned before, we have Torah, which is in the Tanakh, which is in the Book of Esther, and then we have Hanukkah, which is not in the Tanakh, and then there are other days of commemoration that happen even later in Jewish history. But the ones that we're going to look at tonight, these are all in the Tanakh. Now, we will eventually look at them in more detail. So we'll look at them when they come along on the calendar. But to understand them, you also have to understand the whole arc. The Jewish calendar is a unified calendar. It is not just a collection of random holidays that happen to be where they are. The 4th of July is a great holiday. I love it. It has no connection to Thanksgiving. Right? And they have no connection to January 1, it's New Year's Day in America. And they have no connection to Memorial Day, and they have no connection to Veterans Day. Each one is just President's Day, Martin Luther King Day, it's wherever. There was no theme behind them. It was just good days to celebrate or remember important things in American history or American culture. Nothing against them, and I celebrate all those holidays I just mentioned. The Torah doesn't work like that, right? Because, well, the Torah knew what it was doing when it started, rather than having to pick it up over some time. So we're going to see that there is a thread that connects all of the holidays. There's a lot of common information as well, but we'll go into them in much more detail as each of them approaches on the calendar. So this is not all you're going to hear about these holidays. I'll give you the grip. Oh, would you mind? Thank you. It looks like someone else. Yes. So this will give you the groundwork for the whole rest of the holidays that we'll be covering. I'll just wait.
So the first one is starting the year, yeah?
No, actually, Purim is the last holiday of the Jewish calendar.
Oh, yes. Yes, if I just go by the Jewish,
yeah, by the Jewish calendar. And we'll unravel why that is, because a lot of people think that the first holiday is Rosh Hashanah. Not true. Did they follow you, or?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Hey, good evening. Leave the door open. It helps air out the room here. When it's a night like this, I like to just let the air have some, I let the room have some fresh air. All right, so Shalosh Regalim. These are our three main holidays, right? Literally, Shalosh Regalim means 3 legs, but we're not talking about a stool. These were the 3 pilgrimage festivals. These were the 3 holidays where, as you can see from the book of Deuteronomy, 3 times a year on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we also call Pesach or Passover. On the Feast of Weeks, we call Shavuot. Sometimes people also will call it Pentecost. And on the Feast of Booths, which we of course call Sukkot, other people might call it Tabernacles, all your meals will appear before the Lord your God in the place that he will choose. That was, of course, eventually Jerusalem, but there were other places in the meantime. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed, but each will come with his own gift, according to the blessing that the Lord your God has bestowed upon it. So 3 times a year, on these 3 holidays, everyone went together, wherever the temple was, before that had been done, in order to celebrate these 3 great holidays. And these are what we call the Chagim. And Chag is the Jewish word for a holiday, with more importantly, technically for a festival. And these are officially the 3 festivals. These are the three main holidays around which everything else revolves, as we will see. Okay, so as I mentioned, these are pilgrimage festivals. We have Pesach, which is also called the Feast of Matzah. We have Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, and Sukkot, the Feast of Booths. We'll do a little bit about each of those. So if you don't know too much yet, don't worry. Every holiday has 2 main components. And it has a historical component, and it has an agricultural component. So we're going to look at the history first. So for all 3 of the holidays, right, for Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, all 3 of the holidays are connected to the events of the Exodus from Egypt. And this is what the Torah itself says about their 3 holidays. Right? Pesach, that's the obvious one. Right? Passover is when we actually remember leaving Egypt. This is the big celebration of leaving Egypt. Very, very obvious historical connection. Shavuot, people don't often connect to the leaving of Egypt, It's called the giving of the Torah. As I'll show you in just a second, the giving of the Torah is tightly connected to the leaving of Egypt and, of course, our experience through the wilderness. And Sukkot what symbolizes the protection on our journey. And in fact, when the Torah talks about building the booths, building the sukkah, it talks about it specifically as remembering what we had to live in while we were traveling. So as we'll talk a bit, even though Sukkot nowadays people usually think of as being a harvest holiday and a spiritual holiday, the Torah describes it also as a holiday where we remember that traveling in those little tiny booths, our shacks. Make sense so far? All right, so let's string that together. Shavuot, how does this work? Well, after we finish the holiday of Pesach, after the first night of Pesach, we begin something called the counting of the Omer. We'll cover this more when we get to that time of year. The counting of the Omer lasts for 7 weeks. 7 times 7 is 49 days, right? And then, bam, you get Shavuot. That may sound like just interesting little calculation to remember when Shavuot happens. But if you do the math, if you go from the second day of Passover in the month of Nisan, and you count your 49 days, you will get eventually to a Monday, which is the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, a new month. And then Tuesday, God gives us the command that we are going to be kingdom of priests. And that means on Wednesday, we have to set up a time to receive the Torah. So we set boundaries around Mount Sinai. We wait 2 more days of seclusion. And then on the 6th day, we get the Torah. And that day happens to be Shavuot, right? So the math within the Torah itself, which is not set out explicitly, right? God never put a little spreadsheet in the Torah. That's what I had to do. But the way the Torah describes the events, if you're reading carefully and you do the counting, realize that it lines up that Shavuot is the day that the Torah was given. So that means that we celebrate Shavuot historically because of the giving of the Torah. Make sense? Okay. Agriculturally, they also have a lot of interconnectedness. Now, when I say agriculturally, it's important to remember that we were all farmers. Everyone pretty much was a farmer. If you weren't a farmer, you were the guy who was like a blacksmith, and the farmer was probably paying you with what the farmer worked. And people weren't paying with credit card. They didn't have PayPal. People paid with barter. And so they give you grain, they give you fruit, they give you bread, something that was made from what had been grown. And in Israel, there is a particular type of agricultural and it specifically contrasts within the Torah with the land of Egypt. The land of Egypt was wonderfully regular and therefore dependent. Right? The Nile flooded at time every year, and that flooding would prepare you for the new agricultural cycle. And that meant that all you had to do was go down to the river, get the buckets, carry it back, pour it in your fields, and you could irrigate everything. And they invented some things that were better than buckets, but it was up to you. In Israel, not so much, right? The Jordan River ain't the Nile. It's a lovely river, don't get me wrong, but this is not the Nile River. It's not one of the great massive rivers, and it doesn't have the annual flooding and replenishment the way the Nile does. And it doesn't water the whole country. Meaning if you live, on the coastal plain, the Jordan's not doing you any good. So that meant that the Israelites had to rely on the rains, and they had to rely on the springs. But most of the time it was the rain. That was the main thing they relied on. And that meant every year you were biting your nails, hoping and literally praying that the rains would come at the right time and the right amount, and you'd be able to not starve to death. And like I said, that wasn't just 5% of the population. That was 95% of the population were farmers. The other 5% were worried that the farmers wouldn't get enough growing, that they wouldn't be able to have food either. So how does that tie into our holidays? Well, all 3 holidays are major agricultural moments in the calendar cycle of Israel. Pesach, notice again, Pesach is the first of all of these holidays. Pesach is the beginning of the barley harvest. We'll talk about why that's important in a minute. But barley was the first grain that would ripen after the winter. Shavuot is the start of the wheat harvest, and that's the beginning of the summer months. And Sukkot is the final celebration of the cumulative harvest. So by the time Sukkot comes around, your harvest season is basically done. So all three of these are basically beginning, middle, and end of your harvest cycle. And this is also one of the reasons why you don't have a Torah festival during the winter, right? Late autumn, all the way up until the end of winter, there are no Torah festivals because there are no major agricultural movements happening in the life of the community. Again, we'll talk about why the agriculture and the food matters. So, if we plot this together, we can see how these all fit interconnectedly, how the history and the agriculture actually complement one another. So, Pesach, our first holiday, right? Slavery ends. Well, what's happening agriculturally? The barley harvest is bringing an end to your winter famine, right? During winter, you're not growing anything, right? And nothing, you're growing things, but you're not harvesting anything. So all winter long, everything that you grew last year, you're just watching the stacks get smaller and smaller, smaller and smaller, and you're watching in your field, hoping the grain's going to get higher and higher. And you're hoping that this won't be too gone before this is ready. That is an incredibly stressful time for anybody in the pre-modern world, where they had supermarkets with canned food that would last forever. You are worried that your food is going to run out before your new food has grown. That's what it's like to be trapped in Egypt, right? That's what it is to be dependent, to be a slave, to not be able to know you're going to make it to the next. What's Pharaoh going to do to me? That tension of being in Egypt is symbolized by the winter lack of food. So these two come together, and when the barley harvest begins, freedom. Right? It's like, yes, we're not going to die. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine. I don't know whether any of you have ever been running on fumes in your car, right? You know, the car says it's empty, and you know any minute you're going to run out of gas. Mm-hmm. And then you come around the corner, and there's the gas station. And you're like, yes! And the car just sort of coasts into the pump. That feeling of relief, that's barley, that's Pesach, right? That's the feeling of liberation, of we made it, we are out of the danger zone. However, that feeling isn't done, right? And forget about the gas, but that feeling of out of the danger zone isn't done. We begin the Omer, right, which is historically our march to, but that means that you are now having hope. So you continue to harvest your barley, you continue to bring in the first things that are growing, and you're good, but you're also, it's not perfect yet, right? It's not ideal. And this has to go back to the different types of grains. Anybody here eat barley? Eggs? Yeah. Yeah, do you eat barley a lot? No, you don't. You know why you don't eat barley a lot? Because it doesn't taste good. It's bland, it's rough, it's coarse. And people make barley stew out of it. No one wants to eat barley except for like health nuts. And there's another reason why the ancient world barley wasn't so popular. It was great because it ripened early, and that meant I'm not going to starve to death. But the amount of calories you get out of an acre from barley is much less than the amount of calories you get out of an acre of wheat. At the door again?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for being our door person.
That's good.
Right, so if you're a farmer, you have to make a decision, right? When you're planting your fields, how much barley do I plant so I won't starve to death by the end of winter? And how much wheat do I get the most bang for my effort out of the ground, right? Be able to harvest the most calories. Now, nowadays, most of us, we're watching our calories, right? Hi. Right. Nowadays, most of us are watching our calories. We try to limit our calories and all of that kind of stuff. Well, that's because we've totally tipped the balance the other direction. Back then, the big job was getting enough calories. That was the hard part of life. Nowadays, the hard part is reducing calories. Back then, it was producing calories was your challenge. And so during the period between the barley and the wheat, you're happy that you're dead, but you're also waiting for the true finale, for the true beginning of what is going to be the best of what you're doing. And what is that? That's Torah, right? Freedom is great, but freedom without purpose, freedom without substance, freedom without direction, freedom without that life-giving support that Torah gives, it's a little hollow. It's not filling. Just like barley without wheat, I can live on barley. I'm not going to enjoy it because it doesn't taste nearly as good, and it's also not going to sustain me as well. Right? It's not as good of a food agriculturally in pre-modern societies. Nowadays, yes, it has lots of health benefits. Back then, that wasn't what we were worried about. Wheat was where you were at. And so Shavuot comes along, giving of the Torah, the beginning of the wheat harvest. This is now. Now we've made it. This is the beginning of life. Right? Here was survival. This is life. And so the connecting between Pesach and Shavuot by the counting of the Omer, of actually counting each and every day between that, is to remind you that it's nice to be surviving, but we are meant to be living. And that way it keeps you moving forward rather than resting here and forgetting that there's a bigger purpose that we were given our freedom for. Right? We weren't just given our freedom so that we wouldn't be slaves, which would be reason enough, but God gave us a bonus reason for making us free, and that's the giving of the Torah, as symbolized by our faith. Now, Passover lasts for 7 days. Shavuot lasts for 1 day, because there's a very different workload. Right? The beginning of the harvest season for the barley, work is still very light. It begins to pick up as the barley ripens and you get more and more and more that you can harvest. The wheat harvest, going through the summer, this is when things go crazy. Right? The reason why God gave us long days during the summer is so that we had many hours of sunlight to work in. The reason that we need to work so much in the summer, because there are many hours of sunlight, which makes everything go like crazy. So it worked out very nicely. It sort of complements itself. So Shavuot is only 1 day long. We'll talk about why it's 2 days long now. But historically, in the Torah, it's only 1 day long in order to make sure that we don't lose time on being able to harvest everything, which was, again, the continuing march to Israel and the long days of hard work that go along with it. How are we doing so far? I know this is a lot of information bouncing back and forth. So if there's any questions, just fire away. All right, so then at the end of summer, beginning of autumn, the holiday of Sukkot, and this is reminding us of God's care, God's shelter along the way. And you'll notice very full timeline of our holidays, we never reach Israel. Right, the holidays never include a holiday for reaching Israel, which is kind of a little unusual, right? I mean, how come we have a holiday but we don't have a holiday for getting to Israel? I should point out, in the modern world, we actually have a holiday for the establishment of the new state of Israel, modern Israel's Independence Day, but that's not a biblical holiday. And that's primarily because this holiday cycle is meant to be a circle, not meant to be a straight line, right? So that each year we are meant to go through this process over and over again, because the agricultural process is repeating, and this emotional process is continuing of worry, relief, anticipation, fulfillment, gratitude for the protection, and then we do it again. Because that's how life works. I mean, how many times have you been worried about something of, oh, am I going to get the job I want? Am I going to be able to get through the surgery that I have coming up? Am I going to, my kid's going to be able to succeed the way I want them to? And you worry. And it begins to happen, and you're like, oh, good, it's going to happen. I'm still a little nervous. And then, yes, it's all going. Yes, great. And it finishes. And you find something new to worry about. And you go through the process over again, right? But there is no finish line for life, right? It's just doing laps. But every time we do the laps, we have a chance to grow and sustain ourselves and continue to move up, but not forward.
So I feel like you did say this, but just to be clear, that March to Israel is no longer happening.
Correct.
Okay. shelter along the way, still going. And then
Still going.
there is no holiday to celebrate actually being in Jerusalem.
Correct. Well, not just Jerusalem, but even crossing the border into Israel.
Okay.
Now, ironically, well, not ironically, probably rather intentional on God's part, when we do celebrate Passover for the first time in the land of Israel, right after we cross the River Jordan. So when Joshua crosses the River Jordan, we get our first Passover in Israel. So in a way, Passover happens to coincidentally, as if it's a real coincidence, happens to also be when we really first enter the land of Israel. But that's not how we celebrate it. We celebrate it as a remembrance of slavery.
Like there's a day in the dates that in World War II, after all that was done, that on May 14, 1948, that is celebrated to commemorate the day that Israel was reestablished as a country in Israel, isn't that?
Yes, but that's the 1948 establishment.
Correct, yeah.
This is 2,000 years ago.
Right.
In the Torah, which is the topic for tonight, there is no mention of when we cross that border. And remember, in the Torah, we never do cross the border. Right? At the very end of the Torah, the book of Deuteronomy, the last few passages, we don't make it to Israel yet. We're right up at the edge, which is why Moses dies, because he can't go across that border. And once Moses is dead, we don't have the Torah anymore. Now we move to the book of Joshua. And so as far as Torah holidays go, we can't establish an actual mitzvah commandment, a level of God saying, you must do this, once Moses is gone, right? Moses was the only person who had that authority to establish a permanent commandment. We have many holidays like Israel, which we all should be celebrating. We'll talk about that when we get close to the day. Although I should point out, we follow the Hebrew calendar for the celebration of Israel's Independence Day. So that's on the 5th of Iyar, which can sometimes be in May, sometimes be in April. It all depends on what the solar calendar is doing.
What about the Chabad,
I mean, what do they celebrate? Or?
No, how do they decide? Because I know, like, some people, like on certain high holy days, like some people may base it on how the moon.
Well, that is the Jewish calendar. We use the moon, the lunar calendar.
People just use the Chabad, or people just.
Well, Chabad uses the lunar calendar like the rest of us. They don't have their own calendar.
Oh, no, people like literally like some places, like some people will literally look at the moon and determine by how the moon looks when like certain holidays are celebrated. So some people will just go off of the date that is set on the website. Right.
So anybody who's using their own eyes to establish when the month is and when the holidays are is doing it wrong.
That's what I'm saying. See, that's what I was trying to think. Okay, so that's wrong. Okay.
No one should be using their own eyes. Now, in the ancient world, right, before the temple was destroyed, back in the good old days, each month began only when we had witnesses that were cross-examined by the court, and then the court would proclaim the new month.
Right.
But we don't have those courts, and we don't do that nowadays.
Right.
And so therefore, we all use a calendar that we've been for about 1,600 years that was calculated to do the job of what the eyewitnesses would have done. So the rabbi sat down and worked out, we know what the moon cycle is, right? Because the moon is nice and regular. All we have to do is work that out, plus the compensation needed, because the lunar months and the solar year, they don't line up perfectly. And so we have to add in some leap calculations to make sure that the holidays start. If you don't have those, if you don't use only a pure lunar calendar, you actually end up with like the Muslim calendar, which doesn't do that. And that's why Ramadan is at a different time every year.
It doesn't do what?
It doesn't compensate for the difference between 12 lunar months and the time it takes for us to go all the way around the sun.
Is that just sometimes in the Jewish calendar there's 13 sometimes?
Exactly right. We will add in a whole month in order to compensate. Right? So the month of Adar, which is the last month of Pesach, right? Say it's too early for Pesach. We need to do this whole month over again. But that was what they used to do. Nowadays, we've done the math, like I said, 1,600 years ago, and we use that for whether we need an extra month or not. So you can look at the calendar for the next 100 years and know when Passover. You don't need anyone to go outside and look.
Okay. Wow.
And Chabad and the conservative movement, the reform movement, we all use that same calendar that's 1,600 years old.
Okay. And you guys, you don't follow anything that has to do with Kabbalah or anything, right?
Well, Kabbalah is part of Jewish tradition and Jewish history.
Do you guys like? Does everyone here like follow, keep up with it at all personally? Like,
That's a longer question. Maybe we should talk about that afterwards.
sorry.
Okay. All right. So how do we build these? Right? How do we actually put them into practice? Well, for all three of them, we light candles just like we were lighting for Shabbat at the beginning. We do Kiddush with a slightly different text, just like we do for Shabbat, which is looking over the cup of wine or grape juice. We have services because it's not just a regular weekday anymore. Now it is a festival day. It is a Chag, or what we also call a Yom Tov, which means literally a good day. We do Hallel. Hallel is a special set of psalms. It's Psalm 113 through 118 that we chant and sing. We do special Torah reading in order to mark the nature of the day and read from the sections of the Torah that deal with each day in particular. So there's a different reading for Sukkot than there is for Shavuot. And just like on Shabbat, we refrain from doing any work. I'll do another whole class on how we stop work on Shabbat and what we count as work, because it's a technical legal term. It's not just like casual feel like to you. Except on the holidays, there is a special exception, which is you are allowed to do work that comes together with cooking. So, for example, on Shabbat, there is no cooking at all. And that's one of the big work categories that we don't do on Shabbat. On festivals, you are allowed to cook. There are still some things to make it work without breaking other requirements, but cooking is allowed on. So, like I said, you'll have to hold on for what does no work mean until we talk about Shabbat in more detail.
Cooking is allowed if the holiday doesn't fall on Shabbat.
Oh, yes, exactly. So, thank you. It's a very important exception, which is if it's Passover and Shabbat, because sometimes they hit the same day, then yes, Shabbat cancels out all your cooking. And now you're not cooking because of Shabbat. But if Passover is on a Tuesday, you are still not doing other work, right? You're not writing, you're not building stuff, you're not lighting new fires and things, but you are allowed to cook on that day. So yes, it's a very important exception. Shabbat always trumps everything. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about what's needed for each. This is, again, a brief overview. We will go into a lot more detail when the holidays come up on the calendar. So for Passover, there are two main things that we concern ourselves with uniquely for Passover. One of them is the Seder service / meal. The Seder is the very special, very beautifully organized dinner, learning, discussion experience. Before there was dinner theater, there was the Seder. Before people knew about having a symposium of everyone together to discuss things, we had the Seder. So the Seder has very special steps that we do in order to guide us through re-experiencing the slavery and re-experiencing the liberation and the retelling of that story. That ritual meal has some major components to it, which include the eating of matzah, that's the unleavened bread, the eating of maror, the bitter herbs, and also of wine. We'll go through all of that in much more detail when we get closer to Passover. The other part of Passover's observance, excuse me, don't know you probably spam, is the avoidance of chametz. Chametz is what is called leavening in English, but that's not exactly clear because it's a technical term in Hebrew. Chametz is flour that has been made with either wheat, barley, oats, rye, or spelt, right? All of them. You just use wheat, you just use oats or whatever, and you mix the flour, right, the ground up grain together with water. If you let that last for 18 minutes before you are baking it, it has already begun to puff. Right now, nowadays, people add yeast as well to make things puff even more. But even if you don't put yeast in it, if you just mix flour and water, it will start puffing. And if you let it puff, you can't eat it during Passover. Right? That is chametz. And again, we'll go into much more detail of how to make sure we avoid chametz during Passover. So we not only don't eat it, we also have to get rid of it. So if you've got a loaf of bread in the fridge and Passover comes around, have a loaf of bread, have to find it home, because it's not allowed to be with you. Did you have another question? I thought I saw your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what is the definition of Seder?
So Seder, an order, the order in which you do things, in order to remind us that there is a way that we're doing this meal. We're not just sitting down and picking out. We are doing this meal with very great mindfulness and precision in order that we have the right experience. So that's what we mean when we say Seder.
Now, I want to ask another question. Is that okay?
Of course.
Oh, thank you. Now, going like McDonald's and eating a burger.
Yep.
Is that okay?
Nope. Nope. So when we talk about keeping kosher in a future class, we'll go into more detail for that. There are many problems with eating the meat at McDonald's, which is not kosher meat.
Right.
And putting kosher meat together with cheese is also a prohibition. And then during Passover, the bun is leavened. It's and so that would also be a problem.
Without Isaac alone,
Yeah.
period. That burger's bad.
Yep, cheeseburger's bad. Yeah, they're
Burger King bad.
Sorry. Yep, cheeseburgers are a thing of the past if you keep going. Right? They just can't happen. The only way you can have a cheeseburger is to either have fake meat or fake cheese. So you can get like vegetarian meat that isn't from an animal, and they put real cheese on that and go to town.
Yeah.
Or you can get vegetarian cheese, which isn't really from a cow and not made with any milk, and you can put that on real meat and have yourself a nice
So go vegan for a cheeseburger.
for at least one part, either the cheese or the meat. One of those has to be not from an actual animal. Once they're from a cow or from or any animal, or from the milk is from an animal, then no mixing. And when we talk about kashrut in more detail, we'll talk about how we avoid that the mixing of meat and milk, and why, and what Torah tells us of why we're supposed to be doing that. So that's the basic framework of Pesach. Again, there's lots more to learn about Pesach, which we will cover when we get closer. Shavuot is the easiest holiday ever to observe. Remember, it's only one day long, and the Torah doesn't give us much else that we need to do. As far as the Torah is concerned, there are no special observances required. We do the regular ones that we talked about: lighting candles, doing kiddush, having a special service, having Torah reading, having Hallel, all of that. We also have customs. Now, the customs are not the same as mitzvot, right? You're not required to do a custom, but they are very, very common, and they also have a lot of benefit and nice. And they're nice to do. So, for example, it is a custom in most communities to eat dairy. Now, that's unusual. Most holidays, we are carnivores. We like meat. Right? Meat in the ancient world was rare. And I don't mean like cooked rare. I mean, couldn't get meat. And that was because you couldn't afford. You've got a cow, and that cow is giving you milk, or that cow is helping you in the field. If you kill it, it's gone, right? It'd be like eating your car. It's like, okay, maybe there's a lot of business there, but once I eat my car, what am I going to do? So, in fact, most people would only eat meat 3 or so times a year. Guess which times a year they were? The festivals. And that was because you would offer the sacrifice, and then you would eat part of the meat from that sacrifice, and you would share it with others as well. And that was your meat intake. Any other kind of meat you had would be like little leftover scraps, scrapings, birds that you might have caught, that kind of thing. But proper red meat, we saved that for the festivals because that was when you could actually afford it and had another reason for it. So doing dairy was unusual. The tradition gives us a couple different explanations. Because, like I said, the Torah doesn't tell us to eat dairy. This is a custom that came later. And one of the great explanations I like is that God has told us by this point in the story of the Exodus that there are going to be requirements for how we, but God hasn't explained how we do that. And if God hasn't given us the Torah yet, we don't know how to make an animal go from being alive to being a steak and do it correctly. So that means we're on a forced non-meat diet until God gives us the instruction. And reminding ourselves that there is a nice thing.
That's what they said Noah was a vegetarian, right?
After Noah, it seems that people were definitely going to be having a taste for meat. And that's from, yes, from that section. Although whether or not it was supposed to be vegetarian or not, that is a topic of great debate.
That's why people say that that's what it's said, not it's come.
Exactly. Yeah, lots of things. Tikkun Leil Shavuot, or recent custom, only about 500 years old. Yes, you do have to get used to the idea that only 500 years old is recent in Judaism. I know that's longer than there's been the United States, but that's still new as far as Judaism is concerned. Tikkun Leil Shavuot was a custom that was begun by the Kabbalists, by the Kabbalah, and the idea was that at the time of the giving of the Torah, we overslept. That God had to come and tell us, get up, it's time for the Torah. In order to repair our mistake, in order to compensate for what our ancestors did in the past, we now try to spend the night before Shavuot studying Torah. And so some people will stay up the whole night. Some people will stay up most of the night. But it's a way of trying to say, look, God, we really do appreciate what you gave us, and we're not going to be, you're not going to catch us sleeping on the job. Okay, Sukkot. Sukkot has a lot of mitzvot that go along with it, a lot of things that we are required to do. One of them is we dwell in the sukkah, and that's for the 7 days. The sukkah, this booth, which we'll go into more detail later, should be like your home. Even though it's a little shack in your backyard or on your patio or front lawn or whatever, that is where you're supposed to be spending most of your time. If the situation makes you comfortable, however, you should go back into your regular house. Right? This was a very important concept because the holiday of Sukkot is the one where we are specifically told you should rejoice, you should be happy. So therefore, God's not going to tell us to do something that would break one of God's other commandments. So when God tells us to celebrate by being in a booth, and then we find out that our booth is full of snakes or scorpions or something, whether it was, then go back in your house, right? Because God did not tell you to sit out there in the snow, or sit out there in the hay, sit out there in the rain. So there is a balance here between sitting in the sukkah and actually enjoying yourself during the holiday. The roof, which is known as the schach, word, has to be clear and natural cut. So that means that you are under the sky itself, right? You don't build it under a tree or under a roof. And the roof built for it has to be branches, bushes, and stuff like that that you've cut to lay on top. Again, when we get close to the coat next year, I'll walk you through the details. For each of the days, we also wave the lulav and etrog. The lulav and etrog have multiple pieces. It has a palm branch. It has hadath, which are 2 myrtle branches. It has arava, which are 3 willow branches. It has an etrog, which is a citron, which kind of looks like a super lemon. And we wave it in 6 directions. Say we wave it to the front, side, to the back, to the left, to the up, and down. It's symbolic of God everywhere around. Some people will liken the different pieces of the lulav to being a person. The main branch from the palm, like the spine. The hadath, the myrtle leaves look like eyes. If you look at them, they're shaped like an eye. The arava are shaped like lips, and the etrog is roughly heart-shaped, or roughly heart-shaped. The idea being that all the parts of us, again, to serve God. Make sense? Okay.
So that's from Kabbalah, right? That concept.
Well, it's from the Midrash.
The Midrash,
Right.
Isn't the Midrash like based off of the Kabbalah?
Other way around.
Okay.
Yeah. The Kabbalah is also quite recent. So these are much older teachings.
Okay.
So we have, bonus holidays. Now, when I say bonus holidays, obviously these are in the Torah, but these are holidays that have special meaning that are next to or around the other major holidays. And there are 3 of them. One of them is a holiday that people know almost as, which is Rosh Hashanah, often called the Jewish New Year, and it is a Jewish New Year. In Judaism, we've actually got 4/5 New Years. But Rosh Hashanah is the day when we tick over the number on our calendar. But like I said, Pesach is the actual cycle of holidays. And that goes back to that whole historical as agricultural theme. Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Din, which means the day of judgment. So this is our judgment day. We get one every year. We feel as though we are judged. The world is judged for how it has done over the last year. What was its behavior like? What was its quality like? And we imagine God like a king, reading the book of our deeds and weighing our actions. So God is the accountant. We often call this a cheshbon nefesh, a spiritual accounting, to check, how did we do last year? It is a time of tshuva, repentance, because when we recognize that we made mistakes, we believe that God gives us a chance to always fix our mistakes. And we imagine God also like a father, lovingly calling us back. Right? So yes, God is the king and God keeps the record. God wants us to follow the law. God is also a father, a parent, who wants us to do that because he loves us, not because he is some, tyrant. So we consider that day very, very serious. It's also called Yom Teruah in the Torah, which means a day of sounding. And this is the sounding of the shofar. Shofar is a horn from an animal, not a cow, but any kosher animal is technically fine. It is a mitzvah to hear the sound of the shofar, and it is meant to be a wake-up call, an alarm bell, right? It is meant to say, guys, have you been sleeping during the last year? Get up and behave, right? Change the way you're living. And it is a beautiful, beautiful sound. Even though there are so many words we put into our service during this time of year, the sound of the shofar cuts past all the words and all of the self-deception that we build up to really pierce into us and guide us home. So it is a beautiful part of the service on Rosh Hashanah. Good so far. Again, these are quick summaries. We'll go through the more detail later.
But for the sounding of the shofar, they put a wait a month before, isn't it?
So we begin with right during the month of Elul, the month before Tishrei, the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. At the morning minyan, we will also blow the shofar. But that blowing of the shofar is a build-up. It's preliminary, not actually right. This blowing of the shofar, we say a bracha, we say a blessing for, because it is a mitzvah, because it is a commandment. For the ones that we do during the month of Elul, it's not actually commanded, but it's always really good to start getting ready in advance.
It's like a preparation to get to.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you're going to, start a new job. You probably should do a little work and research before your first day on the job, or else you're going to find that that first day is a little overwhelming. And so too, blowing of the shofar the day before the month of before Rosh Hashanah is there to say, come on, get up, and do. Come on, get up. And then and by the time Rosh Hashanah comes along, hopefully we stop hitting snooze and we're really ready. Yom Kippur comes 10 days later. Right? Yom Kippur is 10 days after Rosh Hashanah. And also 5 days before Sukkot. Going to be very important, as I explain in a second. The Yom Kippur is the day of atonement, the day when God actually finalizes the forgiveness for us, the community, for the world, for everything that we did wrong, that we are fixing from before. Right? So wrongs between us and God gives us forgiveness. Wrongs between us and other human beings, God forgives us once we've actually made things right with the other human beings. All right, so if I insult Yira, if I steal $50 from you, I can go to God and say, God, I'm so sorry, I broke your commandments about insulting, about stealing. And God's like, that's nice. Now go apologize and give her her money back. Because until you do that, you don't get forgiveness. Right? We actually have to make things right among us before God is going to give us forgiveness. Now, if I do something only against God, I ate my cheeseburger, then that's between me and God God will forgive me once I show that I repent, that I am sorry for what I did, and that I am going to do everything I can to avoid doing that again in the future. Also on Yom Kippur, in order to make sure that we are fully focused on what we are doing, the Torah tells us that we need to go through a process of fasting. Now, this fasting means not eating, no drinking, no anointing. People used to put like oils and stuff on them. Modern equivalent would be like perfumes and things. No pleasure bathing. You're not going to go to your hot tub on Yom Kippur. Hygiene, washing your hands and that kind of stuff. So if you're not spreading germs, that's okay. No leather shoes. Leather shoes were considered a sign of arrogance, a sign of pride. And so if you're wearing your like fanciest leather shoes, and it's like, whoo, hoo, hoo, look at me. It's like, look at you. We all know on Yom Kippur we have messed up. So who are you to be like drawing attention to yourself? So we don't wear any leather shoes, and we avoid sexual intimacy. Not because there's anything wrong with it, but because that tends to take our mind off other things. So for the 24, roughly about 25 hours of Yom Kippur, all of these are off limits, unless you have a note from your doctor. Right? So if you need to eat, if you need to drink, and because of medical reasons, then yes, those are of course allowed. The other ones, there aren't really medical reasons why you need to do those every day. So you can usually get not expect to be doing, a doctor's note.
Right, but the you can brush your teeth and take a shower in the morning?
So what's that?
2 years I still breathe on before I get in the shower, and I brush my teeth. And
So-
this is so morning.
So most authorities do not encourage showering, right? If you fell down in a pile of manure, by all means hose it off. But if you're talking about I showered yesterday and now it's Yom Kippur, most authorities say no. That you may think that's right, but it's not actually helping anything. Now, if you need to wash your hands, right? If you've got like gunk caked in your eyes that you have to wash out with a cloth or something, most authorities say yes, that's okay. But jumping into a shower, no. And brushing teeth, similarly, most people will say this is not actually necessary for hygiene. You're not going to get sick if you skip a day of brushing teeth. So most authorities do say that brushing your teeth is not actually hygiene. It is more. I'm not quite sure what the right word is for. You do need to do it regularly, but you can definitely go for one without it. Especially if you remember, you just brush your teeth right before you go to services on the day before Yom Kippur, and you can brush your teeth when you get back the next night. So yeah, you're going 25 hours without brushing your teeth, but it's not like that your teeth anyway. But you're not eating, so your teeth aren't going to be getting covered in cake. So you can before Yom Kippur begins, you're fine, if you will. You brush your teeth after that, and you're good to go until the next night when you've had your break fast, when you've eaten after the end of Yom Kippur. Then you can brush away that before you go to bed. So really, there's no harm done by skipping it in the middle. And human society doesn't fall apart just because we skip one shower and a couple brushing of the teeth. But you're right, it is amazing how used to it we've gotten. It does feel weird, but it's part of the flavor of Yom Kippur. Okay, so now with that in mind, now that we've got this whole map, I'm going to have to back up again. Boom, 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 boom. We need to slot them in. So Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, or Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right here. Right? And what that means is that before we get to the Sukkot, before we get to the celebration of everything we've accomplished and everything that we've harvested, we have to do a check of that. Now that's what you'd be doing if you were a farmer, right? If you were a farmer at the end of summer and the beginning of fall, you'd be counting all of your hay, you'd be counting all of your straw, you'd be counting all of your wheat, you'd be counting all of your fruit, and you'd be making sure, okay, how much do I have? Am I going to live until the next barley harvest? Well, Rosh Hashanah tells us you don't just count all of your wheat, you also have to count yourself. What have I done this last year? What was my growth? What did I grow? What did I ruin? And how does that all fit together? And then you've got 10 days to fix all that up, anything that's left over. Again, Judaism always says you should be fixing your problems as you go, right? If I steal $50 from you, I should really give it back to you tomorrow. But if I had to wait, for whatever stupid reason I gave myself, I could still fix it before Yom Kippur at that last minute. Yes.
Wasn't there like in the times of like in the Old Testament where it talks about how after 7 years, any debts you had?
Right. So debts, but not crime. Right. Okay. So there's a difference between a debt and a crime. If I borrow $50 from her, then yes, sabbatical year comes along and cancels that debt. If I steal $50 from her, that's not a debt, that's theft. And theft does not get canceled if you just stay away long enough. That is still a crime until I have actually paid my debt. So that's my criminal debt.
You talking about like, when you like literally like
Stole
tried to
money.
forced her to give you money and you took the money from her.
I just stole it from her purse.
Oh, and
you know?
went into her purse.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you mean.
When I say take, I mean literally, thieving, stealing money. If I borrow money, sabbatical year, even there, I should repay it if I can, right? If I can repay the money and I'm saying, oh, I'm not going to, because I'm just going to wait for the sabbatical year to come along, it's not a good thing either. But having had that day where we did our accounting and where we do our fixing, and then Yom Kippur comes along and we can then feel that everything has been wiped clean, right? We are back to that perfect, pristine state. Now you know why we celebrate at Sukkot like we are crazy, right? It's so much fun because everything has been taken off our shoulders, right? It is ultimate sense of relief and completion. So that harvest, we're so happy about our food, we're also now so happy about our soul. And putting together a good meal with a good soulful feeling, that's like so much better than Thanksgiving when a lot of people are all like worried and stressed. This is like you have gone through it all that stress has been gotten rid of because you gave yourself the time to do the reflection, to do the work, to fix everything. Now let's party, right? So that's why it really is just the capstone for the whole cycle. But then again, it starts all over and we do it again because we're human. Okay. Now, at the end of Sukkot, we get a bonus holiday. It's a bonus holiday. So the Torah tells us that there's Sukkot. And then after Sukkot, on the 8th day, we say Shmini Atzeret, convocation, an assembly on the 8th day. And this is the day right after Sukkot. And there's nothing unique about it in the Torah. It doesn't tell us, apart from sacrifices, that we have to do anything. But it has an atmosphere of the after party. It's kind of like, when you have all your friends around and people from work and you got a big party going. At the very end of the night, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whenever everyone else has left, there's just a couple people, that you're your close friends. And you're just hanging out and you're putting away, throwing away the last of the paper plates and you're having, just maybe one last drink together. And you're just chilling on the sofa and the stress of the party is gone. It's just, yeah, I'm just with my closest friends. And that's really the feeling here is that after all of those holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, right, which is the 1st of Tishrei, 10th of Tishrei, and then the 15th through the 22nd of Tishrei, 7 days long. That's a lot of partying and a lot of thinking and a lot of feeling. And now we're just relaxing with God. And so Shmini Atzeret is a very low-key holiday. Except, more recently, again, Jewish recently, the second day of Atzeret, or the first day if you're in Israel, we now celebrate a holiday called Simchat Torah. Simchat Torah is when we restart the reading cycle of the Torah. Not the holiday of the giving of the Torah, it's the holiday of the Torah, right? We're giving of the Torah, or Shavuot, but we read a little from the Torah each week, called the parasha, and then at the end of this year, we start up again. We get to the end of Deuteronomy, right before Rosh Hashanah, and then we start reading again right at the right after Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, and Simchat Torah. So we make a big deal of that because getting the chance to reread the Torah again, like that. That's a great time. So we do a lot of partying, a lot of dancing, and it is an amazing time. I believe that was it. Yes, okay. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't have another slide slid in there. So those are all the holidays that are mentioned specifically in the Torah from 30,000 feet. Again, we will go zoom in on most of these in much more detail as they start popping up on the calendar. But seeing the overall pattern of how we have these highs and quiet times and loud times and busy times and relaxed times, and getting a feel for how that whole calendar works helps you find your bearings and your footing of the holiday. The holiday has its flavor, but it really is part of the training of holidays. They're not unique like American holidays are just sprinkled around the calendar. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. As always, questions, please email or give me a phone call. But we'll go into more detail on all of these holidays as they come up.
Rabbi, man, I have your email before we leave.
Sure. Actually, my email is available for all. It's Rabbi, RABBI, at tiflorida.org. It's a very simple one to, right? Rabbi, TI stands for Israel. And since there are a billion Temple Israels, Temple Israel, Florida, tiflorida.org. So even if you lose the piece of paper, you can still remember it.
All lowercase?